Dear attendees, welcome to the Diplomacy and Beyond Talk series hosted by the Institute for Cultural Relations Policy. My name is Anna. I am the project manager of the foundation, and I would like to inform you that Diplomacy and Beyond started back in 2014 and hosted over 16 events with collaboration with one of the universities based in Budapest. But unfortunately, as majority of facilities, organizations, and different bodies were forced to move to online due to the pandemic, since last year, Diplomacy and Beyond as well can be accessed online in Zoom and Facebook Live, which allows us to have better audience today and in the future as well. By Diplomacy and Beyond, we're aiming to discuss and bring up issues related to international relations and diplomacy and variety of up-to-date topics. My co-host today will be Maria Guillemot-Rito, who will be moderating after the presentation of our speaker today. And finally, about our guest today, who is Giulia Secchi. Giulia Secchi studies and collaborates with SIOI as the tutor of the Master in Sustainable Development, Geopolitics and Resources and Arctic Studies. A title she will achieve in December of this year. She's a member of the youth branch of SIOI since 2017. She has been a vice secretary and treasurer of the MSOI Committee of Milan, later elected as national advisor. She's also a co-creator and co-host of the UN Generation podcast. She obtained a master's degree in international relations, defending a thesis on China's Arctic policy and its legal and geopolitical implications. So now I would like to give the floor to our guest to start our very interesting topic and presentation. Giulia, floor is yours.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me. I will share the screen. But it is disabilitated. If I could be habilitated to share it.
Just a minute and
yes.
You will be able to share your screen. Maybe you can try now.
Okay. Yes. Presentation. No. So can you see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so my recent studies focus on China's strategy in the Arctic, and also from a geopolitical and legal perspective that we'll see briefly, and on the Arctic regional security complex. Yeah, general overview. I'm sorry if there is some Spanish words. I was translating it because I also presented it in Spanish, and maybe some words I missed them on the translation. So the general overview will be on the historical background of China's domestic and foreign policy that led them to the idea of the Belt and Road Initiative. So to give a little background, then will be an analysis of China's strategy in the Arctic precisely, and the Polar Silk Road, that is the hallmark of the Belt and Road Initiative that interests to us regarding the Arctic. China's Arctic policy and its adherence to the legal regimes in the Arctic will be seen briefly because it's a huge topic, but we have a little time. And also China's Arctic policy from the perspective of the Arctic countries, but just some of them, like the United States, Denmark, through Greenland, and Russia. So as we see, interior and exterior political China has many hallmarks. Like we see how China went over many historical and political changes from the 70s and 80s through the 90s and 2000. For example, the first big event that interested China was, of course, the most famous Tiananmen Square massacre and international sanctions. But previously, and before this dramatic event, there will be a rapprochement between China and the US through this joint communique that was signed. And from an economic perspective, also tension were eased by the opening and the bringing in of from outside. So China was opening up, and of course with the collapse of the Soviet Union and communism, some more tensions were within China's political realm. But then with Deng Xiaoping keeping a low profile, something strategy, China tried to present itself on the political and international stage as a trustworthy country. So we see that China, if on one part, the Taiwan crisis was enlarging, on the other part, China was signing many agreements as for the ASEAN +3 that involved China, Japan, and South Korea, or many others with Russia and strategic association with it within the Shanghai Five. Sorry. So on the environmental field, like ratifying the Kyoto Protocol, and of course, being back on the economic realm, we have investment and certainly abroad, so the going out strategy. Then we have the accession to the World Organization and the internationalization of the Chinese currency, that is the renminbi. On the second half of the 2010s, the strategy, the political strategy, has a major change, because with the Xi Jinping strategy of striving for achievement, this political it's more assertive on the political field. And here is where the economic belt is presented, and also the global strategy is presented. So the Belt and Road Initiative has been developed since the 2015, and also concerning the Polar Silk Road, it has been an idea that came up in 2017, also in a joint sharing with Russia, because they started to develop the Yamal natural gas liquefied partnership. So China became like a major importer of that kind of natural resources. That is very important from the both sides, so from Russia and China as well. And going on, it is important to take into consideration that in this during these years, China confirmed itself on the global stage, developing its own, like it says, Beijing consensus, in contrast with the Washington consensus that was the main one, welcomed by every country. So the China's Beijing consensus was influenced, of course, by the Westphalian vision of the primacy of state sovereignty, and these are the three main hallmarks. So innovation, economic development, and self-determination, that is in direct opposition, as we see, to the idea of Western intrusion, great power intrusion in one country's own development, that is promoted by the Washington Consensus. So this is the modern Silk Road, and these are the main corridors. So the land corridors and maritime corridors. As we see, the Polar Silk Road, the northern pass through the northern sea route of Russia, and can reach Northern Europe in a more, we say, free way, because it avoids mainly choke points through the Canal Suez and also the Malacca Strait. So as we said, it has been presented in 2015 as a Global Forum for Asia through the opening address by President Xi Jinping that talk about towards a community of common destiny. And this kind of concept has been repeated very often also in successfully in the White Book of Arctic Policy of China. And to present this project that we should not call project, but initiative, like it's just the word, the right word is initiative, as an initiative for everybody, that a win-win, that has win-win results for everybody. And it is based on the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence that were first like theorized by Zhou Enlai in 1950. And these are mutual respect, non-mutual aggression, no interference, as we said, equality of states and mutual benefit, and peaceful coexistence. So this is history of China in the Arctic, main milestones of China in the Arctic. So yes, during the 20th century, China acceded to the Treaty of Svalbard. That was a treaty that guaranteed exploiting rights to every nation from Norway, but not territorial rights. Then we stepped to the 90s almost with the founding of the Polar Research Institute of China. So China's activities in the Arctic started to take place. Then within 1993, we saw the first icebreaker that was built and acquired from Ukraine, Xuelong, that is like Snow Dragon, that's the translation, let's say. Then China joins the Arctic Scientific Committee and began many expeditions, also with a station in New Iceland in 2003. Then we have the first icebreaker built within China, that is the Xuelong 2nd, and which crossed the ocean Arctic to reach Iceland for the first time. And finally, in 2013, we have many activities from the COSCO Yongchuan that ship through the Northeast Passage. And one of the main hallmark is that China was admitted as an observer after having submitted is is willing to accede to the Arctic Council. After 4 times, it was admitted as an observer. That is also a wake-up call from the Arctic Council states that Arctic activities were not just an interest for the Arctic countries, but also from non-Arctic countries, because what happens in the Arctic has reverberations also south of the Arctic, of course. Then, Yes, so we see other many activities and cooperation activities with other Asian countries like Japan and South Korea. In 2015, the idea of the Polar Silk Road began to emerge, as I said, in cooperation with Russia. Oh, sorry again. And China declared itself a near-Arctic state, which sparked many controversies and debate on it from Arctic and non-Arctic countries, for example, the United States, that we will see later. It has been included in the agreement to prevent unregulated ICS fishing. So we see that China involving itself in many cooperation and scientific initiative. And the Arctic was integrated officially in the Belt and Road Initiative by identifying 3 blue passages. And one of these is, of course, the Polar Silk Road. In 2017, the Sino-Russian liquefied natural gas project was started. And in 2018, China's Arctic Policy White Paper was published. And this is one of the main, let's say one of the main like important and fundamental milestone of China's activities in the Arctic, and China's willing to confirm itself as an interested and trustworthy partner in the Arctic, let's say. So the 3 main Arctic shipping routes are the Northeast Passage from North Sea to the Barents in the west. And it's the northern route that makes up 90% of the Northeast Passage. So the route that passed through northern Russia, so Siberia, etc. The Northwest Passage passed through Canadian archipelago to the Beaufort Sea to the west. And the Transpolar Passage, it's the one that crossed the central Arctic basin and about nautical measure from beyond the outer limits of the territorial sea, so within the exclusive economic zone. So although these corridors connect the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, still presence of sea ice that of course is melting at a fast pace, still are not a safe passage for ships by the moment, and not safe, like it has just a window of time to be crossed at the moment. So, but why China is considering navigating through the Arctic is for this reason, this 3 main reasons. So as we said, it's time saving, so it's shorten its trip, and also with respect to the Suez Canal and the Strait of Malacca, but also from a strategic point of view, as we said, because these are vulnerable routes, because you see, as we saw with the Evergreen accident, that left not just the Evergreen itself, but hundreds of other trade shipper. It is of course not so safe passage. And energy resources, so 30% of oil and 30% of gas that are not yet discovered are under the ice-covered sea, but now is melting, and these resources are even more attainable. And it is maybe a new supply chain channel for China, of course. So these are just some figures that can give you an idea of like how many resources are trapped in the Arctic ice. The Arctic Council, as we nominated, is of course composed by the Arctic countries that are Canada, Kingdom of Denmark, through Greenland and Faroe Island, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Russia, Sweden, and USA from Alaska. But of course, there are observer countries that in the first place were European countries, so Germany, Netherlands, Poland, etc. Then in 2013, there has been an opening to Asian countries as well, with China and also India, Japan, South Korea, because as I said, the Arctic countries evaluated the fact that these are also important partners in the condivision of scientific cooperation. And permanent members are the indigenous people of the Arctic countries and the working groups that works on these important topics. So it's the Arctic Council. It's not a governmental organization. It's intergovernmental in the sense that it involves the government from these Arctic states. But of course, it's not a political organization. It's a cooperation organization, and it has been founded as an high-level forum for the 8th circumpolar nation, and through the Arctic Environmental Protection Strategy. So it was the foundational, let's say, document along with the Ottawa Declaration that formally establishes the Arctic Council. And we have to precisely say that the Arctic territories are located beyond the circumpolar circle, the Arctic Circle, that is 66 degrees and 25 minutes north of the Arctic Circle. So China's Arctic policy, it's founded on 3 pillars of respect, cooperation, and win-win result, plus sustainability, and as 4 policy goals that are to understand, protect, develop, and participate in the governance of the Arctic. The press conference that have been during the publication of the white paper was like an occasion for China to present itself as a responsible major country interested to develop scientific cooperation with the other countries. And some important declaration have been made, like China will not overstep or better, nor be absent. So China will not have territorial claims, but at the same time will not stays behind when it comes to cooperation and rights that are guaranteed to non-Arctic states, like those of shipping, exploitation of resources, and so on. So the melting of the ice has, of course, as we say, many like downsided, as also some upsided, but the downsided are exceeding, like it changes the natural environment, it's accelerated global warming and sea level rise, it increased in extreme weather events, and also at major social and economic reverberation, and of course the thawing of permafrost release not just rich resources, but also mercury and methane. On the other side, it is an opportunity for commercial use to greater navigability and also development of the regional resources. And comes for Arctic Regional Security Complex. So after Cold War, it has been talked about the Arctic exceptionalism. What does that mean? It means that Arctic has been, of course, at the center of the Cold War for the proximity between the 2 major superpowers that were confronting at that moment. But after the war, the Arctic was substantially a region immune to geopolitical turmoil, detached from geopolitical dynamics, and it was becoming functional to cooperation and peaceful coexistence. Also, the Arctic Council excluded military and security affairs within its agenda. The Arctic Regional Security Complex is caused by an intersection of causes that are human-related, as climate change, but also the resurgence of geopolitical competition towards resources, food, health, and economic insecurities. The fragmentation means that we cannot speak about one Arctic. There are many Arctics, of course, from a geographical point of view, but also from a geopolitical point of view. Nonetheless, this phenomena of Atlantification and pacification that is common in the let's say in the biodiversity realm, it's also a geopolitical aspect, because what happens in the north as like influence the south of the world, of course. And this regional security complex is said to augment the US-China security dilemma that we'll see later, because the US talk about a new polar version of the China threat theory. Okay, that wasn't translated into English, I'm sorry. As I said, now is a talk about the end of the exceptionalism, the Arctic exceptionalism. Now with war in Ukraine, we have seen this, the suspension of many cooperation fora, and the Arctic Council is the first one. So cooperation within Arctic Council will be suspended, and Russia will be ousted from this like multilateral forum. The risk is that missing this cooperation will be very dangerous on an environmental point of view, of course, because countries are not sharing their know-how, are not sharing their competencies and instruments, and just to like contrast these environmental changes. And there has been also a remilitarization of the region, because countries are building up back their military operations and activities, not just the United States and the NATO, but also Russia as well. Although these Arctic countries and also China has declared that they will not like compromise on the Arctic order and on the peaceful Arctic order. From a legal point of view, China is a signatory of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, and it was ratified in 1996. So from the point of view of China, this international treaty precedes the national law in maritime matters, but there are some provisions that are being like announced, some reservation towards this provision, like denial of the innocent passage of worship, rejection of international arbitration for settlement of maritime disputes, because they prefer consultation between the states in the disputes only. But there is a reciprocity principle, so an inconsistent policy would discredit China's claims in the South China Sea. So if China behaves in a manner in the Arctic, it will be inconsistent with its claim in the South China Sea. Also, the Arctic Ocean is, of course, not the South China Sea, and China has territorial claims in the South China Sea, while it does not in the Arctic. And of course, the Arctic is not this priority to China as the South China Sea. However, maybe the advantages of multilateral cooperation could be transferred to other territories like the South China Sea, and maybe have some good reverberation on it. So China White Paper is not a legal document, but it's a policy document, and as such, it has unilateral political act. So it cannot create obligation for China only, can create obligation not to act against it, but it's not capable of modifying established international legal norms, neither for itself or other states. and it has to go through legal process in accordance with international law. So the Arctic Council, coming to the Arctic Council again, it has three main approaches to governance that could interest China. The first approach is the Ilulissat approach, and honestly is not the one that China would sustain, because it has been built up not from the 8 Arctic countries, but from the 5 Arctic countries that are the littoral states. So the countries that are that are open to the sea. The second one, it's better approach because it entails that bilateral cooperation on some matters that could interest China, as fishing, economic matters, as that could be like a good approach. And the ideal one is the last one, the piecemeal approach, because it's even more specific on the subject that have been under regulatory agreements. So let's see very briefly this part. There is this thing of the common heritage that refers to the central area of the Arctic that goes together with the right, that entails the seabed, ocean floor, and soil beyond the limits of national jurisdiction, and goes together with the right, with the right to freedom of the ice seas. So the fact is that this is common heritage, but at the same time, it is res commune and res nullius. That means that it is open to everybody, to all states, and as such do not belong to anybody. This is an important concept. China suggested that taking the Svalbard Treaty as a model, it could be resolving Canadian and Russian sovereignty claims over the Northwest Passage and Northeast Passage. Because under this treaty, Canada and Russia would retain full sovereignty over the pass, while simultaneously allowing free international navigation rights. Because, of course, in the Arctic, there are some territorial claims between the Arctic states. Coming to the bilateral, let's say, relations between China and some of the Arctic states that I mentioned. So China and United States, it's of course one of the main relations that is of interest. During Xi Jinping's visit to the United States in 2015, he spoke about a new model of major country relationship. So it could be useful to avoid a so-called two-city trap that was theorized by Graham Hansen as were inevitable when an emerging power, in this case China, threatens to overthrow their current ruling power, that is United States. However, Missenheimer contrasted this theory by theorizing that the conflict involves an element of choice, so it's not always inevitable, so by the dominant authority. In this case, if war is to happen, is because the dominant authority has rejected alternative option and mobilized for conflict. In this case, back to Trump government and Pompeo as a Secretary of State, there was this rhetoric from the part of United States on China of this new polar version of China threat theory. So that China theory expanded through also the North Pole. So it intensifies the dynamics of the security dilemma between the two countries. The situation was that the states try to increase their own security, but have the effect to diminish the security of other states. However, there are also room for cooperation in the scientific field. So we see that China and United States are both in the annual Arctic Social Science Forum, and there have been Chinese investments such as the Alaska liquefied natural gas project. Coming to Russia, it's an interesting relation because we have to be sure to not talk about alliance. That's to be avoided because we're not talking about alliance. It's rather a partnership between the two ASEAN countries. It's China's most exemplary partner when it comes to the development of the Polar Silk Road and the Northern Route, for the fact that, as I said, the Yamal liquefied natural gas project is the main feature of this partnership, and that's very important for both. There will also be an alignment between the Belt and Road Initiative and the Eurasian Economic Union that involves Belarus, Russia, Kazakhstan, Armenia, and Kyrgyzstan. So an important perspective is that of Mackinder geographic pivot of history that maybe someone can recall. So the geographic pivot of history, it seems to moving north. So giving growing strategic importance to the Arctic and strengthening ties with Russia could offer China greater access to the region. At the same time, a realistic perspective is that of historical mistrust between the two and cultural differences could make more of a pragmatic relationship based on common purposes that are maybe ephemeral and make like any long-term deal actually not so like feasible. And last, Greenland is interesting because of what it represents. Like Greenland is a constitutive nation of the Kingdom of Denmark. Still, it is important because, well, it's the second biggest island in the world. It's perfectly at the center of the Arctic, and it's like a bridge between the United States and the rest of Europe. And in fact, the United States have the military base in Thule. And from the part of Denmark itself, it has like sparked the China factor. That is something that influences relations between the capital, Copenhagen, and Nuuk, that is the capital of Greenland. So Denmark is, of course, like as kind of mistrust towards China for when it comes to Greenland, but it has also like developed relations with China. It doesn't want to this relation to be jeopardized, but by what happens in Greenland. And of course, there is a obligation and a relation with the United States for what I said, and for the military presence in Thule. China is interested in Greenland for the rare earth elements. In fact, in Greenland, there is the biggest deposit in Kvanefjeld of rare earth elements that serves for technology purposes and so on. And of course, there is the independence factor. It is said that the Nuuk is testing the ground for independence, and so it is alarming Copenhagen on the sovereign grounds, and Washington, of course, for proximity, because as I said, the United States are very, very near Greenland. So to conclude with a citation from Michael Byers, no country will own the North Pole. The Central Arctic Ocean belongs to all humanity. And for who is interested, this is a study from my master thesis that is retrievable through ResearchGate, and the bibliography contains many more resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia, for your very interesting and enlightening presentation. Now we will move on to some questions. First of all, I would like to ask, how does China's Arctic policy contribute in combating climate change?
Well, there are many paragraphs and chapters within the Arctic policy. Let's say that puts the environment and climate change at the center. On the practical way, on the practical side, I cannot say it because it has been said to be also a little bit vague, but the point is that China wants to cooperate with the other states that are involved in this multilateral fora, give their tools and know-how, and also acquire from other states that are better prepared on this, so that climate change and like environmental security is like augmented. So I would say through this multilateral fora, this sharing and willingness.
Thank you. My next question is, how does Chinese activity in the Arctic play out in the global shift of power in contemporary international politics?
Yes, well, as I briefly said, the fact that China was trying to put itself at the center of Arctic governance, at least being involved, it was like a wake-up call for United States and other countries from positive or also negative point of view, because Arctic Council states decided to open their like observing status membership to many more countries, so also to Asiatic nations. At the same time, being China a very powerful and emerging nation, it has sparked some worries because of the real intention of China. So the previous China threat during Cold War and during the 20th century has not disappeared, and it has taken the form of a polar threat. It means that China is not just there where it is. It could expand also the People Liberation Army with maybe a Northern Sea fleet. So it has sparked some kind of worries, because it is said that political and strategic willing is gray, so it's not so transparent. So it is, yes, it's like that.
Thank you. Moving on, could you briefly describe the relations between China and Iceland?
Okay, so as far as I know, Iceland, it has been the first nation to be visited through transpolar shipping from China, and it has also been one of the first European countries to be at the center of agreements between, of course, China's government and Icelandic government in 2013, if I remember. So actually, there are many agreements and good relation with Iceland, as far as I remember. Also from a scientific perspective, there must be some agreements on geothermal energy. Geothermal sharing, yes, energy between Iceland and China.
Now, our last question. In your opinion, will China be able to play a leading role in Arctic's Northwest Passage shipping route as in the Northeast and Central Passage?
Well, that's very interesting because, as I mentioned, the Northwest Passage sail is a difficult passage. That's to say, not only because the Canadian archipelago is spotted with many islands that could hamper the passage, actually, and of course, from a territorial and sovereignty point of view from Canada, but also because actually to be navigable, the passage should be free from ice from most part of the year, and just like hoping for that would mean that climate change is eating very much more. So of course, China is interested in developing new routes for its interest to not be trapped in choke points, as I said, and to shorten the route because of its trades. I guess it could be a major protagonist, but it has still to be seen, of course, from this external condition that China could not control.
Great. Thank you very much once again for your presentation and answering our questions. Now I give the floor to Anna.
Thank you. Well, it was very interesting and informative presentation, I think. And at the moment when military actions are not as a rare phenomenon, it is interesting to know more about the less popular and less discussed topics such as China's strategy in the Arctic and the regional security. So thank you for finding time to discuss with us this very interesting topic. I would also like to thank those that have sent questions. Is there anything that you would like to add, Julia?
Oh, well, I've been very delighted to be here to discuss it with you, and I'm very honored to be invited. Thank you so much.
So thank you one more time. If there is anything, any resource besides your research, we would gladly share with our interns or with our viewers. Those are young professionals or students. We would gladly share it on our pages. And as a last thing, I would like to remind our viewers that at the end of December, ICRP is going to host the Security and Sovereignty Conference. So we're gladly inviting everyone to listen to interesting presentations of our keynote speakers. One more time, I want to thank everyone, also Maria for co-hosting with me. And I want to say goodbye to all the participants. Thank you.